Then the enemy makes his move. This is it. Live or die.
The Vietnam War, also known as the Second Indochina War, was an undeclared war in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. The Vietnam War and active U.S. involvement in the war began in 1954, although conflict in this region stretches back several decades. The war was a long, costly conflict that pitted the government of North Vietnam against South Vietnam and its allies, the United States. More than 3 million people were killed during this war, and more than half of the dead were Vietnamese citizens. Opposition to the war in the U.S. bitterly divided Americans, and in 1973, President Nixon ordered the withdrawal of U.S. troops. The Communists ended the war by seizing control of South Vietnam in 1975, and the country was unified as the Socialist Republic of Vietnam the following year.
How Vietnam viewed the war. Many Vietnamese soldiers and citizens suffered greatly because of this war. Lee Bon, who is 63 years old and a Vietnam veteran, was quoted saying, starting life after the war was terrifying to me. With my injuries, I could not continue my education or find a job. But I have let go of my hurt and pain. It's time to look into the future and begin cooperating. Many other Vietnam vets share his same story. Even after the tragedy of the war, many of the Vietnamese side held no animosity towards the United States. Most of the new generation of Vietnamese citizens were too young at the time to even experience the war. Because of this, the new generation sees the Vietnam War as more of a historical event than an emotional trauma. Overall, during the war, people of Vietnam hated the U.S., but it took very little time after the war for the effects of this anger to die out.
From an American soldier perspective, although it wasn't necessarily my choice to join the war, I felt in place because both my father and grandfather participated in great battles. I never participated in the war, but I had a clear idea of what it was from stories from my father, or so I thought. Turns out this war was far from what the war was like in World War II, like my father participated in. On one of the first days of one of my comrades, James, stepped into one of the booby traps in which he fell through the hole that was covered with grass like a cover. At the bottom of the hole there was a crunchy-like substance which made a lot of noise when the American soldier hit it. As soon as he did, dozens of Vietnam soldiers popped out with weapons out of holes similar to the one James stepped in. Although we had better weapons than that of the enemies, they were definitely prepared for us, with countless booby traps and unexpected ambushes. After that day, I was way more alert, but it was as if they did all their traveling underground. They had tons of underground passages, and these made it so hard to eliminate enemy soldiers. It was also often hard to recognize Vietnam from American soldiers. All these combined challenges made it seem impossible to win the war. I wasn't the only one that felt that way either. My family wrote notes explaining how much of America hated the war. Many of my fellow soldiers were drafted into this war and just wanted to go home. I felt as if nobody even wanted me to fight this war. The worst part of it, however, is when I returned home and instead of getting praised in public, I was booed since so many Americans thought it was an unnecessary war. My father was praised after he returned from World War II, but Americans saw this war as a way different situation.